All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Previtt. I am one of the lead faculty for the modern management of the older adult geriatric division. We have 3 courses in our geriatric curriculum. We have our 8-week online course, Essential Foundations, with our next cohort starting in the middle of August. And we already have a lot of seats filled up for that cohort, so super exciting. If you have taken that course, we have our 8-week online advanced concepts course, which takes all the essentials that we go through in our first course and applies them to special populations. We only run that course 2 or 3 times a year. Right now, only twice. And our next cohort is starting in October. And then we are back on the road, really exciting for MMOA Live. So we have a ton of courses coming up the end of 2022 into 2023. August 13th, 14th, I'm with Alex in Rockland, Maryland. And then we are going to be rocking in Greenville, South Carolina at the end of August. So if you are interested in jumping in to any of our MMOA courses, I encourage you to take a look at our new shiny website with our site map, and you'll be able to find us there. All right, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about menopause. This was actually a request that was made of me a while ago, and I'm just getting my stuff together to get this podcast up and running because there's a lot of things that we need to consider for our postmenopausal clients. So the definition of menopause is the closing of a female's fertility window and is marked by 12 months of lack of menstruation. So when a woman has gone for 12 months without a menstrual cycle, then she is considered to be in menopause. When you are in menopause, this can be either physiological, where people reach the end of their fertility window as a consequence of age. This can also be artificial. So individuals who are going through cancer treatment, for example, or those who have had a hysterectomy where the ovaries are removed, are going to see an immediate blunting of their sex hormones, which is going to push them into menopause at whatever age that intervention was done. And so when you think about menopause is when you have a drop in reproductive sex hormones. And the most prominent and most pertinent to our physiology is this 50% reduction in estrogen that happens as a consequence of menopause. The menopausal transition is not abrupt. So we have this period of time where fertility is starting to wax and wane, and that is termed perimenopause. This is met with irregularities in hormone levels. It's met with menstrual disturbances that can be having your period more often than your normal cycle, or having periods of time where you don't have it, and then you have irregular periods every 3 months, every 5 months, every 6 months, every 2 weeks. And this can last for quite a long time. The average length is about 4 years, but it can increase for 8 to 10 years. So you can be in perimenopause for 8 to 10 years, and the average age at which a person goes through menopause is 51. So I've done a podcast in the past talking about this estrogen deficiency and how individuals who are lactating and individuals who are going through menopause have similar symptoms or complaints often. And this is an idea where, if individuals are starting perimenopause at 40, there's also now, with individuals having babies later, a direct overlap between fertility windows and the beginning of the menopausal transition. And what that can mean is that individuals can be in an estrogen deficient state for quite a long time leading up to that menopausal transition, because they are going through pregnancies or have been lactating for several years, or if they're nursing for 2+ years. And that can have considerable I don't want to say consequences, that's not the right word, but considerations for us to be thinking about with respect to some of the clinical considerations for individuals who are postmenopause. So when we are working with somebody who is in menopause or is postmenopausal, especially right kind of bracketed around that transition point, Some of these symptoms that individuals are going to be complaining of are things that allied health professionals can help with. So some of the clinical considerations for individuals who are in menopause are going to be genital urinary syndrome, and I'm going to go through all of these, vasomotor symptoms, aka the hot flash, pelvic floor dysfunction and a sharp rise in pelvic floor dysfunction, osteoporosis, and heart disease. So let's kind of break these down very like in a summary for what we need to be thinking about with these individuals if we're treating them. So the first one is genital urinary syndrome. So this is signs and symptoms of menopause that are experienced by about 50% of females who are going through menopause. A lot of these statistics are based on survey data or individuals who have sought out medical care because these symptoms have reached a threshold that they have some bother from them. What that means is that these are probably underreported statistics, and we can probably assume that these numbers are much higher. Interestingly enough, though, in Becca Levy's book around positive versus negative age stereotypes, cultures that have more positive age stereotypes, like China, actually have a reduced incidence of genital urinary syndrome versus cultures like the United States and Canada, who kind of have this perception that being older is a bad thing, and genital urinary syndromes are higher in those populations. That's a random aside, which I thought was really cool and neat to think about, but roughly 50% is what we're thinking. So when individuals are experiencing estrogen deficiency, that is going to affect a lot of supports around the pelvic girdle, and it's going to lead to increased incidence of certain types of conditions. So estrogen is protective around the tissues of the vulva and the cervical mucus atmosphere that is surrounding the vulva. So what that means is that we're going to see a drop in ligamentous support because of the slowing down of turnover with respect to the cellular cycle happening at the level of the ligament. So we are going to see a drop in ligamentous support. We're going to see an increase in friability of the tissues around the vulva and within the vaginal wall. This is going to be pertinent when we're talking about pelvic floor dysfunction. We're going to see an increase in vaginal dryness because of a decrease in cervical mucus secretion. And we're going to see that we're going to have a sharper rise in pelvic floor dysfunction as a consequence of these changes around the pelvis. So with respect to genital urinary syndromes, these actually might be barriers to physical activity that if we are not screening for these things, we may not actually know that this is the barrier. And what I mean with that is when you're experiencing vaginal dryness, it can be very uncomfortable with respect to chafing and just overall sensation around your vulva if you are having issues with cervical mucus and lubrication around your vulva. So ways that we can help treat that is if we know that this is something that is a barrier to movement, we can recommend a moisturizer. This is not a sexual lubricant. This is something that is supposed to be worn long-term, that is available at many drugstores that individuals can use to give more comfort with respect to moving around and exercise throughout the day. There are a lot of individuals who are experiencing a lot of these issues. And then a secondary consequence of some of this friability is dyspareunia and loss of libido. So one, as we see vulvar changes that happen as a consequence of menopause, you're going to see an adhering sometimes of the labia minora to the labia majora, especially superficially. And this can cause a blocking or a covering of the clitoral hood. What that is going to mean is that sensation, sexual sensation can be blunted, which can obviously lead to loss of sexual satisfaction. And then we also see that estrogen is responsible for, at least in part, for libido. So we're going to see an increase in friability, which is going to create a increase or heightened risk for dyspareunia or pain with intercourse, particularly penetrative intercourse. We're going to see a potential blunting of the sex response. And then we're going to see that estrogen is going to lead to a lack of libido. And then these kind of feed into each other because if sexual satisfaction is down and pain is up with sexual activity, this is obviously going to feed into that loss of libido where you're not going to be overly excited to be involved in sexual activities when it's painful and it doesn't feel good. So again, this is where understanding what is happening from a physiological perspective can give us good clinical ideologies, or at least a clinical care pathway where we can be referring on to other providers if you don't identify as a pelvic PT, though I will say that everybody should be a pelvic PT with respect to at least having a capacity to screen. And so again, this is where instead of a moisturizer, we would be recommending a lubricant. This oftentimes will lead to pelvic floor hypertonicity, and a lot can be done in order to help with sexual satisfaction. And I've done podcasts as well around the fact that this assumption that older adults are asexual is ageist in nature, and it's oftentimes because of a lot of these other physiological changes that there is help for. So that's genital urinary syndrome. The second thing that we're going to be talking about is vasomotor symptoms. So vasomotor symptoms is a hot flash or the hot flush. This occurs in about 75% of individuals who are going through menopause. It can last between a couple of seconds to a couple of minutes. Average is about 4 minutes. And a lot of times the messaging is that there is absolutely nothing that you can do. Pardon me. When you are in the middle of a hot flash, there's pretty much nothing you can do. You got to ride that wave. But what we're starting to see with a lot more clarity is that individuals who are more physically active are less likely to experience vasomotor symptoms, or they are having a less intense, there are a decreased intensity of vasomotor symptoms. So individuals who have higher levels of aerobic physical activity are shown to have less frequency of vasomotor symptoms. There was also an RCT that just got released this year that took individuals who are going through menopause, who experienced hot flashes, and put them into a 3-time-a-week resistance training program for 15 weeks. And they saw a reduction in menopausal symptoms and an increase in quality of life for those who are participating in resistance training. So I think I'm preaching to the converted for people who are listening to this podcast, but absolutely something that we should be advocating for everybody to be involved in resistance training, but a particular attention being placed on individuals who are in that postmenopausal period of their life. That's vasomotor symptoms. So the next one is the increase in pelvic floor dysfunction. So with the kind of cellular and hormonal changes that happen during menopause, we can understand why rates of pelvic floor dysfunction are going to increase. So 50% of older adults have pelvic floor complaints, whether that be urge urinary incontinence, stress urinary incontinence, mixed urinary incontinence, anal incontinence, or pelvic organ prolapse. In plus or minus with pain. This is often because that our bodies get weaker as we get older, which includes the muscles of the pelvic floor. We are losing some of that ligamentous support, and it creates this environment where rates of pelvic floor dysfunction can go up. Again, we have really good evidence that pelvic floor muscle training is the gold standard and is very effective in improving signs and symptoms of pelvic floor dysfunction, even in postmenopausal females. Unfortunately, the trigger is often to go to their primary care provider, and then medication management and surgical management are oftentimes, unfortunately, the recommended pathway. This is inappropriate. We need to be trying conservative management first, and we need to be advocating for our role with respect to helping with the internal, getting an internal assessment and utilizing that to try and ameliorate signs and symptoms of pelvic floor dysfunction. Fourthly, we're going to talk about osteoporosis. So estrogen is protective around bone mineral density. When we think about our thoughts around osteoporosis, we are very, very much pro-loading, right? Our muscles respond to load, so we load them. Our bones respond to load, and yet we are afraid to load people oftentimes with moderate to severe osteoporosis, especially if there is a fragility fracture that has happened in the past or they are recovering from. However, when individuals are going about their day-to-day, if they want to maintain independence, that is a therapy goal for them, then they have to be able to lift things up and off the ground. They have to be able to apply some load onto their axial skeleton in order for them to be alive as a human. And so we are definitely pro-loading, especially when done in a progressive nature with good clinical reasoning with respect to osteoporosis. So this kind of comes back to that resistance training conversation being really important for our postmenopausal females. The fourth or fifth, I'm not sure where I'm at right just yet, but heart disease is also increased when individuals go through the postmenopausal transition. And there's a lot of thoughts with this. Estrogen is protective around the tissues around the heart. So it is something that with that estrogen withdrawal, you're going to see an increase in risk. Also, individuals may experience a change in adipose tissue placement when they go into a menopausal state. So oftentimes for females, when they have increase in adipose tissue, fat is laid down around their hips, butt, and thighs. With estrogen withdrawal, they have this change in adipose placement where now they have an increase in central weight gain, that central adiposity. And we know that that is also a risk factor for heart disease based on some of our cardiovascular and metabolic syndrome pathophysiologies and the contribution of anti or pro-inflammatory states that can happen over a long period of time with cardiovascular disease. Our metabolic rate stays pretty steady until the age of 63 if we are doing the things that we need to be doing with respect to increasing or maintaining physical activity and trying to maintain as much fat-free mass as possible as we age. However, there are a lot of people as we get older who sit more and move less, and that can lead to an increase in weight gain, especially around the menopausal transition. So things that we are thinking about with respect to how we are conceptualizing or how we are thinking about health promotion with these individuals. So all this to say, when we think about menopause 101, around 51 is when individuals are starting menopause on average, plus or minus, whatever the standard deviation is. Don't go beyond that, what that number is. We see a 50% blunting of estrogen. That is going to have clinical considerations that are going to impact our care as allied health professionals. Genital urinary syndrome, vasomotor symptoms, osteoporosis, increased rates of pelvic floor dysfunction, and heart disease are the 5 things that we are going to be considering clinically when we are working with individuals who are postmenopausal. This is where the importance of physical activity, the importance of nutrition, and the importance specifically of resistance training are to be highlighted, because it is going to affect, have a positive impact on protecting the body of this individual when estrogen is removed from the equation. So things to be thinking about and things to be conceptualizing when we are working with these folks, and a really big push for health promotion because it's going to make a huge difference in the lives of these individuals. All right, that's all I got for today. If you are interested in learning more, you can DM me or reach out through Instagram. If you are not signed up yet, please sign up for MMOA Digest. This is where some of the research around postmenopausal females and exercise, we are putting them every 2 weeks, including this Friday, 8 o'clock. I'm going to be writing MMOA Digest tomorrow. We put out all of our research as we're scouring the literature, and we share it to you. You're very welcome. We share it to you all every second Friday with our MMOA Digest. So go to ptonice.com/resources and you can sign up for our email list. Other than that, have a great week, everyone, and I will talk to you all later.